All right, welcome back. So today I'm going to do step one of adjusting or correcting the vacuum problem for the vacuum module on the transmission. So as in my other video, I said it was hooked up directly to the vacuum pump. The vacuum pump's right there. It's that gray, that's the diaphragm. Then there's the hose that comes out the top and tees, and then that comes up to here, this hose, and that goes straight to the transmission. It should come up to this valve right here, and that's called the vacuum regulator valve. And that should be, it's basically, it senses where your throttle position is and adjust the vacuum going down to the transmission. So the transmission knows how much throttle basically you're giving the engine. With it unhooked, it has full vacuum all the time, which is I think 27 psi, 27 inches of mercury or so. So we're gonna work on this just a little bit. So the first thing I did, of course, there's two tools that I'm using for this, and some wrenches, but basically I have two vacuum pumps. This one I'm actually only using as a gauge. I just bought it. It's a cheapo from Harbor Freight. And then I got the loaner from AutoZone on the other side. Again, you really need one and you need a gauge on the other side, but these have built-in gauges. So I'm using one as the pump and one as the gauge. So the first thing I did was I hooked up to this line here, started the truck, and just made sure it pulled a vacuum. And then I shut the truck off and made sure it held a vacuum. Because a lot of times it's, this line's, something's wrong with it, it's cracked or whatever, and it's a vacuum leak. That's a huge problem on these trucks. So you should check your vacuum lines, even if you don't have a transmission issue now, and make sure they're not leaking. Once I did that, I also hooked up to this, directly to this line with a hose and gauge, and made sure it was holding. It was not. So I went down underneath the transmission. There was a small piece of hose that I replaced, and now it's holding strong. So no major vacuum leaks. So that all that, again, first step, almost always you're going to find at least one, and sometimes you're really bad, and that'll really cause the transmission. If it has no vacuum, so there's a vacuum leak, it's going to shift extremely hard. So that's done. So the next step is to adjust this valve. And to adjust the valve, like I said, basically you have your pump hooked up to the bottom. There's two ports on this valve. Let me see if I can show that. So the bottom is hooked up to your pump, and then the top is hooked up to your gauge. And what you're going to want to do is put 20 inches, don't put 20 psi in this, 20 inches of mercury on this gauge. Then you adjust by turning. There's a couple screws on the side of it. You can see one there and one's underneath. So you could loosen those and you adjust, move this back and forth till you get 8 on this, okay? And that's not at idle, so that's the key. You have to open up this throttle a certain amount. This is your throttle. This is your injector pump, and there's a screw in here, and I'll try to show it. And it has to be opened up a certain amount. So they make a special tool for this. I wasn't going to buy one, so I used my 3D printer to print the correct size. And the thickness, sorry, let me see, make sure this thing's zeroed. Give me just a second. Okay, the thickness, I don't know if you can read it, of this block is supposed to be 646. And then this block basically goes in between There's a right down. It's not, you see, it's the small screw, not the Phillips closest to us, but there's that one with a nut on it. You can see it's a small flathead. And this block goes underneath that, so it goes down right underneath here, and this basically, this, when you open it up, stops on it. So you put the block underneath there, open the throttle up till it hits that block, then you adjust those. You take those two screws or those two bolts out, and you adjust that until you have 8 on this. Then you release it and you test it again. So you put 20 on this side, and then you adjust it until you see 8. And it should do it pretty easily. If this doesn't show anything, or it shows the full, you know, if you have 20 on the other side, 20 inches, and this shows 20 inches, more than likely that valve's bad. So you could buy a new valve, but that's how you adjust it. Let me adjust this one. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, I put the block down there. Hopefully you can see that. See that grayish black block. Again, when you open the throttle, that stops it. So that's where the block goes. Once you do that, you come over to the other side, or come over to your vacuum pump, and bump it up to 20 inches, and it'll go down. Just when I open and close this, there it goes. Okay, so I'm almost 20. I'll adjust a little more, but then on this gauge, I'm only at a little over 5, and that should be set at 8. So like I said, those two bolts down there, I'll loosen those 2 bolts up and turn that. I believe it'll be going towards the turn it towards the radiator some. So I'll adjust that and then show you what it looks like when it's done. All right, I got this adjusted. I'll show you what it looks like when it's adjusted. So I have about 20, I don't know, maybe 21 inches on that side. Currently with the throttle closed, it is about 11 inches or so on this side. So again, block is still underneath the throttle. Open the throttle up and it drops basically to 8. Release. I'm gonna pump this back up just a little bit to 20. Goes back to basically 8 on the gauge. So now that is adjusted properly, and it seems to be working fine. So now I've got 2 different vacuum modulators that should be here next couple days. I'm going to show a test on those. I think it's very important. It may not be, but I think there is a lot of video, or not videos out there, but a lot of universal vacuum modulators being used, and I'm going to test and see if it works or not. I do know most of the ones you see online or that you buy will not work at 10 inches. So a lot of the ones you look up for, like this truck, they all say use, you know, this universal red striped modulator that's adjustable. But if you look at the adjusting range on them, that doesn't seem to be right. So this one has a red modulator on it currently. I got a green striped one coming in, and also a white striped modulator coming in. And I'm going to do a couple little tests with the vacuum pumps and those modulators and see where they activate, and see which one works better for this truck. All right, thanks for watching, and check back in a few days and I'll have another video on it.